Hi friends, this is Andy with Ice of Rice. Today I'll be teaching you how to make pad thai. This is my favorite Thai dish and one that I make almost every week. If you want to skip straight to the recipe, you can find a link to that in the description. Pad thai is the national dish of Thailand, but it's unlike other countries around the world where their national dishes were something that developed over generations and went from being a local favorite to becoming a recognized part of their cultural heritage. Pad thai's origins is actually quite recent, dating back to around 1940. It's typically attributed to Prime Minister Kram, who had taken over the country of Siam and renamed it Thailand and became an ally of Japan during World War II. He launched a campaign called the Thai Cultural Revolution to embrace Western-style modernization in order to become a leading power in Asia. He also issued a series of cultural mandates to promote Thai nationalism and to assimilate various ethnic groups, including the Chinese, Lao, and several tribes into the central Thai culture. As part of this nationalization effort, the Prime Minister wanted to create a national dish that can be used to feed the country when staple ingredients such as rice were in short supply because of the war and severe floods. The government promoted using dried Chinese rice noodles, which used less rice to produce. This is ironic because one of the other things he promoted was anti-Chinese sentiment, and this dish uses noodles, tofu, and a cooking method that came from China. By combining the noodles with local ingredients, they created the official food of Thailand. In order to popularize pad thai, he implemented a program called Noodle is Your Lunch. The Public Welfare Department gave food vendors free cards to sell pad thai and banned the sale of other ethnic foods. Later on, Thai banks gave out business loans to people who lived overseas to open Thai restaurants to help spread their culture and cuisine and increase trade and tourism. Now, pad thai can be found on the streets all over Thailand and in every Thai restaurant around the world. In this video, we'll be doing something a little different. I'd like to take you on a shopping trip because some of the ingredients we'll be using are a little specialized and I want to show you some of the varieties you may encounter. So, let's go shopping. Tamarind is an essential ingredient in our pad thai. This is what's going to be providing some of the sweetness, but definitely some of the sourness for the dish. If you want to go hardcore, this is where you start with. This is the dried tamarind fruit. So what you're going to do with these is basically take off the shell and soak this in water and extract the juices and remove the pulp. For an easier route, what you can do is use tamarind paste. It's essentially the same as the tamarind fruit, but like all the shells have been removed and most of the seeds have been removed as well. You're still going to need to soak this up and remove the pulp in order to extract the juice. The one that we're going to be using today is actually going to be the tamarind concentrate. So all the work has been done for you already. So you could basically use this straight out of the bottle. Fish sauce is our next ingredient. The one that we recommend is the one with 3 crabs. This is slightly more expensive than most other fish sauces, but it has great flavor and is perfect for cooking. This is going to be the one that you use for like at home, and also a lot of restaurants use this as well. Much more expensive would be the Red Boat brand. This is great fish sauce. It has a very concentrated flavor, and it only has 2 ingredients, which are anchovies and sea salt, which is the traditional way of making it. Again, this is much more expensive. I would save this for making sauces, but for cooking, this is perfectly fine. Palm sugar is going to be your sweetener of choice. This is what's typically used in most Thai recipes. As you can see, you get separate lumps of sugar. This makes it a little bit easier to use, and it's kind of already pre-measured out. And what you could do to just take it as much as you want is to break them up into smaller pieces with a knife. You may also find this version, which is basically a larger block of palm sugar, which is slightly softened. I actually prefer the dried version a little bit more, just because it's a little easier to handle. And even though this is a semi-liquid form, it's still very, very tough. So go with this one. One of your optional ingredients would be preserved radish. The one that we'll be using is this one, which is preserved sweet radish. You'll see there are many other types of radishes here, some salty, some sour, but the sweet one is going to be the one that we'll be using. We're also going to be using this shrimp paste. It's basically garlic and shrimp cooked in vegetable oil. And what this is gonna do is bring a lot of great shrimp flavor to our dish. Traditionally in Thailand, they'll often use dried shrimp, which I'll be showing you in a little bit. But I find that using this shrimp paste helps it to incorporate it into the entire dish much better than using like chunks of dried shrimp. So here are the dried shrimp that I was talking about. This will give your dish great shrimp flavor. But since they are dry, it will be sort of like a little bit chunkier. So again, this is why I'm going with the shrimp paste instead of the dry shrimp. But if you want to go old school, this is what you'd use. So one of the main ingredients that's gonna lighten up our dish is bean sprouts. You want to go with the ones that are the long bean sprouts. As you can see, the beans are a little green and yellow, and like the heads. So basically, the beans are much smaller, and you do want to use these instead of these, which are the ones right here, which are soybean sprouts. As you can see, much larger soybeans. These are traditionally used in Korean style cooking, but for our Vietnamese and Thai and Chinese dishes, we typically use mung bean sprouts. Now for our pad thai, what we're going to want to use is something that's around the thickness of a fettuccine noodle. So traditionally, a lot of people would use the dried rice noodles. However, we're going to go over to the freezer section. Now you'll either find these in the freezer section or in the refrigerator section. These are fresh Thai rice noodles. And the main difference is that these are partially hydrated already. So I like using these because they hydrate a lot more evenly. With the dry noodles, you have to soak them a lot longer. And what ends up happening is that the outsides become a little bit mushier and the insides don't rehydrate as evenly. But with this one, all it does is take about 10 minutes of soaking in cold water, and you get a great product out of it that doesn't fall apart. Here are the ingredients for your pad thai sauce. In order to make your pad thai sauce, all you gotta do is combine all these ingredients into a pot and cook it over medium heat for about 45 minutes, at which point your sauce will thicken and it will be ready to use. As you can see, we are making a lot of sauce. However, the great thing about this is that it can last in the refrigerator for up to a couple months. But if you're anything like me, you'll have absolutely no problem using up all the sauce for future pad thai dinners. For your noodles, simply follow the instructions found on the packaging. For these fresh ones, I'll need to soak them for about 10 minutes, but for dry ones, it will require a little bit more time. Here are the other ingredients for your pad thai. In addition to this, I'll also be adding shrimp, tofu, and eggs to mine, but feel free to add whatever meats or seafoods that you prefer. The first thing I want to do is cook my shrimp, and then remove it from the pan as soon as it's done. This will prevent it from overcooking and then becoming rubbery and dry. Next, we're going to saute our shallots and garlic. Make sure to use plenty of vegetable oil. This is a stir fry after all, and you will need all that vegetable oil to make sure that your noodles don't stick together later on. Then we're going to add our shrimp paste and cook it for a little bit in order to bring out all that great shrimp flavor. This right here is the ingredient that takes pad thai to the next level. Now we add our noodles. Make sure to give it a good stir in order to coat the noodles with the aromatics as well as that delicious shrimp oil. As you can see, our noodles still look a little dry, but this is where the sauce comes in. I'm adding about a third of a cup of the sauce and then continue cooking until the noodles absorb all that liquid. Give it a taste to check for texture. If it still seems a little dry, go ahead and add a little bit more sauce and continue cooking until it reaches the texture that you prefer. If you're using tofu, this is the time to add it. Just toss it in the pan and give it a good stir in order to warm it up. Then push your noodles to the side, add a little bit more oil, and then crack a couple of eggs into the pan. Then, using your spatula, break the yolks and then spread it out. Once that's done and halfway cooked, then you're going to want to flip your noodles over onto the eggs. And then give it a good stir until everything's mixed evenly. Add your preserved radish, followed by your bean sprouts and your scallions. This might look like a lot of vegetables, but this is really going to help lighten up your pad thai, as well as to keep the noodles separate and from clumping together. And last but not least, we toss our shrimp back in, give it a good stir to warm everything up, and then serve immediately. And here we have our homemade pad thai. Serve it with some sliced limes and a sprinkling of crushed peanuts, and you have a meal that's as good as any restaurant's. And since we have extra sauce, the next time we make it, will only take 15 minutes. If you have any questions or suggestions for future recipe videos, please leave them in the comments below.